Let's take a look at the functions you'll use most often when you're working with layers in the Layers panel. You can follow along with this image from the practice files for this tutorial or with a layered image of your own. Over on the right in the Layers panel, the order in which the layers are stacked from top to bottom controls the front to back arrangement of content in the image. For example, in this image, the tailor layer is above the pattern layer in the Layers panel. And so, in the image, the tailor photo with the man in the red hat is on top of the pattern photo where those two photos overlap. Well, what if you wanted the tailor photo here to be behind the pattern photo in the image? In that case, come over to the Layers panel and select the tailor photo by clicking on it. Then, click, hold, and drag the tailor layer beneath the pattern layer. Now this can be tricky. You need to wait until you see a double line below the pattern layer and then release your finger from the mouse or the trackpad. And that moves the tailor layer beneath the pattern layer in the Layers panel. And look what happened over in the image. The photo of the tailor is behind the photo of the pattern. Another thing you're probably wondering about is how to create a new layer. Let's say that I want a new empty layer on which I could add pixels, maybe by painting with the brush tool. First, think about where you want to add the layer in the layer stacking order and select the layer just below that. In this example, I'd like to add a new layer above the pattern layer because I want to paint on top of this pattern. So I'll go to the Layers panel and I'll select the pattern layer. And then I'll create my new layer by going to the bottom of the Layers panel and clicking this icon with the turned up page corner. That creates a new layer above the pattern layer. Adding a layer this way creates a pixel-based layer on which you could do things like add color. If you use a different tool like the Type tool or the Shape tool, or if you use the Place Embedded command to add a new photo or another image to a composition, all as we'll do later in this tutorial series, Photoshop will make a new layer for you automatically. So don't be surprised if you see extra layers in your Layers panel when you use any of those functions. When you do make a new layer, it's a good idea to give it a name that's meaningful to you, so it's easier to find later. To rename any layer, double-click right on the layer name and type right over it to enter your own name. I'm going to type Paint and then press Enter or Return on the keyboard. Now let's put this new layer to use by adding some color to it. I'll go up to the Swatches panel. If your Swatches panel isn't open, open it from the Window menu at the top of the screen. In the Swatches panel, I'm going to click on a color. You can use any color you like. And then I'll move over to the Tools panel, where I'll select the Brush tool. I'll go up to the Options bar for the Brush tool, and I'll click on the Brush Picker, where I have a size slider that I can drag to the right to change the size of this brush. And then I'll move into the image, and I'll start to paint, and the Brush Picker closes as I paint on the pattern. Because the paint is on its own layer in the Layers panel, you have lots of flexibility to edit that paint splotch without affecting the rest of the image. As just one example, you could change the opacity of the paint layer. With the paint layer selected, I'll go up to the top of the Layers panel and I'll click the arrow to the right of opacity, and then I'll drag the opacity slider to the left. Keep your eye on the paint splotch as I do this, and you can see that it gets less and less opaque or more transparent. I'll click off of the opacity slider in a blank area to close that slider. That's a simple way to blend the content of two layers together. Finally, what if you decide that you don't want the contents of the new layer at all? You can delete that layer or any layer by selecting it and then pressing the Delete key on a Mac keyboard or the Backspace key on a Windows keyboard. And don't worry, you can undo that by pressing Command+Z on the Mac or Control+Z on a Windows keyboard. And here's a bonus tip. There are even more layer-related commands located in the panel menu, which you can access by clicking this little menu icon at the top right of the Layers panel. So if you ever want to do something else with your layers, like maybe duplicate a layer, take a look in this menu. So that's how to use some of the most common layer functions: changing layer stacking order, creating a new pixel-based layer, changing layer opacity, and deleting a layer. When you're making a multi-layered design, you may need to resize the content of a layer, as opposed to resizing the entire image. To do that, you'll use a transform command. If you're following along, you can use this image from the practice files for this tutorial, or you can use your own multi-layered image. Let's say that we want to make this photo of sewing tools smaller. The first step is to go to the Layers panel and select the layer that contains that photo, which is the Tools Photo layer. I'll click on that layer to select it. Then go up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform. That puts this border around all the contents of the selected layer. So if there were more artwork on the same layer, all of it would be encompassed within that border and all would be resized together. Now usually you don't want to distort an image as you resize it. To avoid that, hold down the Shift key to constrain proportions as you click on any edge or any corner and drag in to make this photo smaller or out to make it larger. By the way, it's fine to make layer content smaller, but in most cases, it's best not to make pixel-based content, like a photograph, a lot bigger than the original, or it may look blurry. The last step is to accept the change that you made with the Transform command. One way to do that is to go up to the Options bar and click the big check mark that appears there whenever you use Free Transform. And that's all there is to it. Another thing you can do is to resize the content of more than one layer at a time. This can save you time and can help you to resize multiple images by the same amount. So let's say that we want to make both the sewing tools photo and the photo of the tailor smaller at the same time. They're located on two different layers, so we have to go over to the Layers panel and make sure both of those layers are selected. The Tools Photo layer is already selected. If yours isn't, just click on that layer. To add the Tailor Photo layer to the selection, hold down the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on Windows and click on the Tailor Photo layer. Then, as before, go up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform. Hold down the Shift key and click on any edge or any corner of the border that surrounds both of the images on both selected layers. Drag inward to make both photos smaller at the same time. And when you're done, go up to the Options bar and click the big check mark to accept that change. So that's how to resize layers with Free Transform. Please don't confuse this technique with resizing an entire image, which is done with the Image Size command in the Image menu, as you learned in another tutorial in this series. In this video, you'll learn how to add multiple images to a composition that you're building in Photoshop. Like many things in Photoshop, there's more than one way to do this. We're going to use the Place Embedded method, which automatically creates a new layer for each added image, giving you the flexibility to size and position each added image as you like. If you're following along, start by opening this image from the practice files for this tutorial. You can leave the other practice file with a similar name closed for now. When we use the Place Embedded command to add another image to this composition, Photoshop will automatically create a new layer for the added image, above whichever layer is selected at the moment. So the first step is to go to the Layers panel and select the layer above which you want your new layer. I'm going to select the background layer. Next, go to the File menu and choose Place Embedded. That opens your Finder or File Explorer, where you'll navigate to the file that you want to add. If you're using the downloadable practice files, navigate to the practice files on your computer and choose this file. Then click the Place button at the bottom right. The added photo appears in the open image in your document window. This photo happens to be larger than the open image, but you don't have to worry about that. Photoshop automatically scales the added photo down so it fits in the original image. Before you complete the placement, you'll scale down the photo and place it where you want it in the composition. To scale this photo down proportionately without distorting it, hold the Shift key as you drag from any of the corners inward. If you want your added photo to be about the same size as one of the other small photos in this composition, use one of those photos as a guide to help you size this one. I'll remove my finger from the mouse or trackpad and release the Shift key. I'll hold the Shift key down and come over to this other corner and drag inward there to get the added photo just about the same size as this other small photo. Next, you'll want to position the added photo where you want it in the composition. To do that, click inside of the border and drag. These pink guides may appear, they're called smart guides, to help you align the added photo to the other elements in the composition. When you're happy with the size and the placement of your added photo, complete the placement by going up to the options bar and clicking the big check mark there. And that's all there is to it. If later you decide that you want to move the added photo, you can do that by just selecting its layer, getting the Move tool in the Tools panel, and dragging the added photo elsewhere in the composition. Or let's say you want to change the size of the added photo. You can do that too. And to do that, you'll use the free transform command that we learned about in an earlier video in this tutorial. So let's say I wanted that middle image to be a different size. I would make sure its layer is selected in the Layers panel. I'd go up to the Edit menu and choose Free Transform, hold the Shift key to constrain proportions, and drag from any of the corners to change the size of that photo. And then click the check mark in the options bar to commit that change. There's one thing to keep in mind when you use the Place Embedded command, and that is that there are some edits you can't do directly on the resulting smart object that this command creates. Now, there's lots to learn about smart objects, but for now, let's just talk about what to do if you run into this situation. Let's say that I wanted to paint on the photo that I added. I'll make sure I have its layer selected in the Layers panel, and I'll go over to the Tools panel, and I'll select the Brush tool. When I move into the image and click to paint, I get this message saying that this object must be rasterized before proceeding. This means that if I click OK, I'll be converting my added photo layer into a regular pixel-based layer. And that's just fine. So I'll click OK. And that's the simple solution that will allow me to paint on my added photo. So now that you know how to add images to a composition, have fun creating your own unique multi-image designs in Photoshop.